Hi guys, today I'm demonstrating how to make butternut squash soup. First of all, I'm going to teach you what a butternut squash is. That is a butternut squash. You have to peel it and then take the seeds out and then dice it, and it looks like that prior to making the soup. The butternut squash is also known as a pumpkin in some countries such as Australia, and it's used as such. Even though technically it's a fruit and it grows on a vine, it is used as a vegetable. The soup in particular is popular in South Africa. The butternut squash is a good source of fiber, vitamin C, magnesium, potassium, manganese, and an excellent source of vitamin A and vitamin E. This is the soup we're going to make. The recipe costs about $10 to make, and it has about 240 calories per serving, which includes 5 grams of protein, 17 grams of fat, 15 grams of carbs, and 2 grams of dietary fiber. This recipe will make about 6 servings. It's a wonderfully rich, thick, and flavorful soup. It became a staff favorite while being tasted in the Betty Crocker kitchens. Our ingredients: we have cream cheese, 2 tablespoons butter, that's 8 ounces of cream cheese, about a half a cup of chopped onions, 1 whole butternut squash, seeded, peeled, and cubed, 2 cups of chicken broth. We're going to be using marjoram leaves, black pepper, and cayenne pepper. Of course, we always want to begin by washing our hands. Here's our 2 tablespoons of butter. We're going to put it in our pot. Put it on medium heat and begin melting it. Once it's melted, we will add our onions. Here you can see the butter is almost all melted. There we go. Now that the butter is melted, we will add our half cup of diced onions. We're going to cook the onions in the butter, stirring occasionally until they are crisp tender. The onions add flavor. As you can see, the onions are starting to sizzle now. We stir them occasionally, keep them cooking evenly. They've been cooking in the butter now on medium heat for about 4 minutes. While we wait for the onions to cook, I just want to tell you about how we got to this point with the squash. In order to peel the squash, it's much easier if you poke the squash with a knife and break the skin in various locations, and then you put it in the microwave for 6 minutes. This softens it up and allows the peeling to be done much easier. Also, I found that using a vegetable peeler didn't work out so well. The vegetable peeler just wasn't quite strong enough because the skin on the squash is rather tough. So I used just a small, sharp paring knife, and that was much easier for me. Okay, it's been about 7 minutes now, and you can see the onions are starting to brown a little. I'm going to cook them for just a little bit longer. Okay, it's been cooking for about 9 minutes now. It's kind of brown, but we don't want it to be all soft and mushy. We want it to still have a little bit of a crispy texture to it, what's called crisp tender. So they're good. Now we move on to our next step. We will be adding the chicken broth, squash, and seasonings. Okay, we're adding our ingredients. The chicken broth. Here's our squash. So I've added the squash, the chicken broth, and now I'm going to stir it up and get the squash nice and moist in there. So it looks like that. Now we'll be adding our seasonings. First we will be doing 1/2 a teaspoon of marjoram leaves. Next we will be adding 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper. One-quarter teaspoon here. Lastly, we will add 1/8 of a teaspoon of cayenne pepper. So I'm doing 1/2 of my 1/8 teaspoon measuring spoon. Now we'll stir up our squash and all of our seasonings till it's well mixed. Then we'll bring it to boiling. I'm turning up the heat somewhat to medium-high to help bring along our boil. Okay, it has been on medium-high heat for about 8 minutes and is now boiling. So now we lower the heat back down to just below medium. We'll put a lid on it and let it simmer for about 15 minutes while the squash gets soft. Okay, the recipe said to simmer it for 12 to 15 minutes, but I found that it was more like 20 minutes to a half hour before it was soft enough for what I wanted. Now we take 1/3 of this mixture and 1/3 of the cream cheese and put it in the blender. Okay, we're going to scoop 1/3 of the sweet potato mixture and put it in the blender. And then put 1/3 of the cream cheese. Then we put it on the blender, put the lid on, and puree it. It's nice and creamy. We'll set this part aside. And we'll do it 2 more times till all of it has been pureed. Okay, this is what the soup looks like after it's all been processed through the blender and pureed. We're going to pour it back into the pot and reheat it now. Okay, I'm turning the stovetop back on to medium heat. I'm going to dump the soup back into the pot. While it's heating, I'm going to stir it with a whisk. We're just going to want to heat it until it's hot, but we don't want it to boil. Okay, it takes about 10 minutes to get it up hot enough. Once it's hot, it's done. Now we'll keep it warm until it's ready to serve. Okay, the soup is finished. However, we want to add a garnish to it, which adds texture and flavor. It's called a pecan apple maple salsa. We have a half cup of pecans which have been toasted. Then we want to get a half cup of diced apples with the skin still on. And then 2 tablespoons maple syrup. Here we're measuring out the 2 tablespoons of syrup. And this is pure, real maple syrup, not the fake stuff that you can buy. Then you stir it up to coat all the apples and the pecans with the syrup. This is our salsa stirred and ready to go. Okay, now we're going to dish up the soup into our bowl. We add a scoop of the salsa and sprinkle it on top for garnish. And enjoy. And I just wanted to mention a few things. This is generally designed to be a side dish. I suppose you could make it into a main dish if you added meat, like bacon would probably be good, and maybe chicken. And you could also just do an apple salsa, or you can just sprinkle it with toasted walnuts, or you can sprinkle pumpkin seeds on it, or you can add nutmeg.